So you want to form new habits? As 2022 is approaching, many of you will want to create new habits. Let me know in the description box what habit you want to create and some that you want to eliminate. Now, Daniel here to tell you about the science of behavioral habit formation and the best scientifically proven ways to form new habits. These are some of the recent books that I looked at to dive deep into the science of habit formation, to really look at all the science behind it. And some of the books that I've read include The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, Atomic Habits by James Clear, Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, and Mini Habits by Stephen Guise, amongst other amazing books that I've reviewed to study in depth the science behind the formation of new habits. So I'd like to first of all give you an outline of what we'll be covering in this short video. We're going to look at the importance of clarity and being clear about what habits you want to create. We're going to talk about a map that BJ Fogg talks about and how you can literally map your habits and the importance of proper design in habit formation. We're going to look at the ABC model for habit formation, which I will talk about in detail. We're going to look at the importance of shine, or celebrating and giving yourself a reward after you achieve a certain habit that you wanted to do. And we're going to look into the science of how you can add new habits and how you can remove new habits. So how you can install and delete habits. So it is very important to be clear about exactly what is the habit that you want to create. So specificity is very important. So you have to know the time and the location of a certain habit. So you can actually start by creating I will do a certain habit at a certain time in a certain location. So this is really important because you have to be really clear about what it is that you want to do. If you don't have a certain plan, well, there's nothing to work with. So you want to have a plan to create a certain habit. You want to really be specific about it. And you also want to look at the consequences of you not performing that particular habit. Okay? So if then, right? So if it rains and you wanted to go for a run, well, you have to look at alternatives. So this just is the basic first step where you really want to be clear about what is it that you want to do. So get out a calendar, specify the time that you're going to do a certain habit and the location. Okay? So here is the map, and I think this is really important to understand, because if you're unable to form a certain habit, well, it's not really it's not really your fault, it's a design issue. So here is a map by BJ Fogg. In his book he has this, and he shows that any behavior is actually a function of three things. It's a function of your motivation, the action or your ability to do that action, and the prompt. So motivation ranges from low to high. The ability ranges from something being hard to do here on the left and something being easy to do here on the right, as well as the prompt. So what we want to do is we want to make the habit easier for us, because that's going to make us more likely that we're actually going to do it. And this is a really, really important point. And Stephen Guise in his book mentions you want to make the habits stupid small. So you want to actually make the habits really, really small. And he talks about that in his book, Mini Habits. Check that out if you want. But he says the smaller it is, and BJ Fogg as well mentions it, if you want to read a book, well, just opening the book, right? Maybe reading a couple lines. The easier you make it, the more likely you're going to be above the action line. So the goal is to make yourself be above the action line. And the best way to do it is by being motivated, but also by making the habit really easy, by making it stupid simple, as Stephen Guys mentions. So what you want to do is you actually want to make it really easy for you to achieve that habit. Very minimal amount of steps. So another thing is the prompt or the cue. And the prompt is only effective when it's above the action line. So the prompt is only effective when it's above the action line. So this is really, really important to understand. If you want to go out for a run, you want to actually put your sneakers or your running shoes in a visible location. That's the prompt. The prompt will make it more likely for you to engage in a certain behavior. Once you engage in that behavior, you want to reward yourself, and we'll talk about that later. But again, for you to be able to do that behavior, to increase the probability and to be above the action line, you want to make the habit really, really easy and simple. You want to make it stupid simple. And for negative habits, you want to remove the prompts. So let's say you want to stop using social media, or you can lock up your phone, because when you lock up your phone, when you remove your phone, you're making it more difficult to engage in that habit. And so by removing the prompt, you're actually right here and you're less likely to engage. This is a nice model because you can map any habit into it. It's not only your motivation, although your motivation does play a role. It's also a function of how difficult or easy the task is. And the goal here is to make it as simple as possible for you to engage in that habit so that you're going to be above the action line. It's that simple. The goal is to be above the action line. And as I mentioned, once you engage in the habit, you want to reward yourself. So in the ABC model, there are actually three components. You want to anchor, you want to engage in the behavior, and you want to celebrate it right after. So the anchor is something that you can anchor into an existing routine in your life that will remind you to do the tiny habit, which is your new habit. So this is something that will help you engage in a new habit. For example, after you sit down at work, you will turn off your notifications for social media. So the sitting down at work is your anchor, and the turning off notification for social media is the tiny habit, the super easy habit for you to engage in the behavior, right? You just simply turn it off. It's really easy. And then you want to celebrate. So really linking that successful action to a positive emotion or a positive feeling, because that's going to release dopamine, and we'll talk a bit about that later on. All right? So this is really, really important. What you want to do is you actually want to anchor an existing habit into a new habit that you want to perform. Okay? And that new habit has to be super simple, stupid easy. Once you engage in that habit, you want to celebrate. And this brings me to my next point, which is actually shining. You want to feel happy that you achieved the habit. And BJ Fogg in his book mentions a bunch of ways you can do it. But the goal is to make it intense, so really absorbing that positive emotion and really being happy about it, but also making it immediate, because the reward seems to fade off the later you do it after the positive behavior, or the positive habit. So you want to make it as fast as possible afterwards. And Stephen Guys in his book, Mini Habits, and James Clear in his book Atomic Habits also talk about habit tracking. And this involves putting an X or marking an X every time you do the habit. And this is kind of like a reward, again, because you don't want to break that chain. You want to keep maintaining your streak by simply checking off each time you perform that habit. So again, you want to reward yourself because that releases dopamine in your nucleus accumbens, which is the reward center. So you feel that pleasure and you're more likely to engage in it again. And the way to do it is by linking that positive action to a positive emotion or feeling, to really be happy, to feel good about it. Sometimes, for example, if you exercise, you get a release of endorphins, natural feel-good hormones. A lot of people think that by simply repeating the task for 21 days, they're more likely to engage in that behavior. But there's no evidence or there's no research into a causality, into the exact number of days that you're actually gonna do that. Charles Duhigg in his book does talk about the more you do a habit, the more efficient you become. Your brain literally wants to be on autopilot mode, and habits and routines allow you to use up less brain space. Literally allow you to use a smaller brain and less neurons and less firing to achieve to achieve it. So by setting a routine, you don't have to use as much brain space as you would in performing the same task without it being automatic, like in a habit. So habits are there for you to use less real estate in your brain to make it much more efficient. But there is no set time as to the exact how many days you need to form habits. Rather, there is a causality into the release of, actually this is what happens in our brain. The dopamine gets released from the nucleus accumbens every time you perform a habit, and that makes you more likely to stick to it. So by linking a certain behavior to a positive emotion, that definitely helps you achieve that habit and perform it successfully, as well as making it immediate. That is also very important. And by tracking your habits, you're more likely to stick to it because you're marking an X every time you achieve it. And so you're literally forming a streak that you don't want to break. To create new habits, and James Clear mentions it in his book very, very clearly, there are some things that you want to do. And these involve making the habit obvious. Again, we talked about this, specifying the time and location, and having a backup plan if you're unable to perform it at a certain given day. Let's say the weather doesn't permit it, etc. Making it obvious and making it visible. So by changing your environment, again, it's a design issue if you're unable to engage in good habits, making it visible. So whatever habit you want to do, right? If you want to meditate, having a pillow in a visible place, if you use that to meditate. Altering your environment for your success and anchoring already existing habits into new habits in terms of habit stacking. Making it really easy is very important, because if you're making it really easy, it's very difficult to fail. And BJ Fogg mentions it beautifully in his book. You can't fail by simply opening a book. You can't fail by doing one push-up. You can't fail by flossing one tooth. By making habits really, really easy, you're unable to fail, and then you're saying yes, you're celebrating after doing that stupid small habit, and you're still getting the dopamine release. If you do more than that, well, that's a bonus. That's extra. That's perfect. So making it really easy and shining, celebrating to release that dopamine, as well as using a habit tracker to keep track of how many days you actually perform the habit. Okay, so celebrating it is really, really important. And you're more likely to celebrate if you're making the habit really easy. You're more likely to map your habit above the action line so that you're actually gonna do the habit. As motivated as you may be, if you're below the action line, by making the habit really, really hard to engage in, by having it invisible, or by having many steps to perform it, you're less likely to do it. And Charles Duhigg also mentioned that exercise is like it actually strengthens our willpower. So people who exercise or work out are more likely to eat healthy, etc. And he talks about a keystone habit. So these habits that are very important in your life, that are more likely to, they're there to help you perform other habits. So people who exercise tend to eat better, etc. So these are habits that you perform in, which makes a huge impact on your life. So if you can, leave a habit in the description that you want to engage in right now, which is going to make a huge impact in your life. So we talked about good habits, but how can we also remove bad ones? Well, that's the exact opposite. You want to perform the reverse operations. You want to make the habit invisible, making it really, really difficult to engage in by removing it from your environment. You want to make it hard, having many steps to perform it, making it difficult for you to engage in, right? Maybe if it's using a phone before bed, you want to really store it in a place where you can't see it, making it more difficult for you to engage in. And what I really like about this actually is that anytime that you're unable to perform a certain habit, well, that's okay, because what you can do is you can actually always know that there's room for improvement. And so by simply knowing that this needs work and having a learning mindset, you don't feel shame. And this is a very important component. Even if your new habit for this New Year's or for Christmas was to read a new book, was to every single day to open a book and read 2 lines. You're making it so easy and you're unable to do it. So there's 2 options. You can make it even easier, right? And then celebrate. Or you can have a learning mindset or a growth mindset and really not feeling any shame or guilt for not doing it, but being flexible and seeing what is it? Why did you slip? Why did you fail? What is it that made you unable to do the task? Now, the best way to do it is by simply mapping that into a BJ Fogg behavior map. You cannot possibly fail if you make the habit stupid small. So I think the best way to do it is twofold. 1, make the habit really, really, really easy for you to engage in, right? That way you're above the action line. And 2 is by making it really easy, by minimizing the amount of steps that you need to perform that habit. All right, guys, with that, we're done this video. Please let me know what is a new habit that you want to create and and what are some of the steps that you will take in actually achieving or performing that new habit.